When you play a solo, do you know exactly where you are in the song at every moment? This is one of the very challenging things that we all have to go through when we're learning to solo on guitar. And I will admit, I found this quite challenging as well many years ago. If we don't know where we are in the song when we're soloing, some bad things can happen, and you may have experienced some of these. Maybe you're jamming with your friends and you take a solo. And you don't know when your solo should end, so you kind of just keep on going and going and going. And maybe your friends are starting to look at you now and being like, come on, man, when are you gonna end? The end of the song form is coming up right here, and that would be obviously a good place to stop your solo. But we wouldn't know where that is if we can't hear the chord changes underneath. Or another example would be, what if we want to do something harmonically really cool in our solo? We can't do that if we cannot hear the chord changes underneath. We want to be able to hear when a song goes from 1 to 4 so that we might hit or target some of the notes of those specific chords. I think a lot of us have been through this, and because a lot of my students here have been through this, I've got a method that will help you to train your ear to hear the changes underneath. Step 1 is just to start identifying when chord changes happen. So we could listen to any song, really. We're going to listen to a couple jam tracks right now, and we're going to just listen to it and see if we can identify when the chord change happens. We're not going to identify what the chord is, what it's going to or coming from. For now, we're just going to say, we're going to clap or snap or say, hey, when that chord changes. So here's the jam track. So that's clearly the 1 chord, right? Nothing yet. Nothing yet. There's a chord change. Now we need to know what we are listening for, right? We're listening for the sound of, in this case, it's going 1 to 4, but we hear the overall harmony of the song changing, and we can use some tips. We can know that almost always chord changes happen every 4 beats, 8 beats, 12 beats, 16 beats, basically at a new measure at some point, right? So it might be 1 measure, 2 measure, 4 measures, but it's often 2 measures, 4 measures. So when we get to the end of those measures, we're kind of hearing, do we hear a harmonic shift at that moment? Let's try another one. So that's the 1 chord. You can feel those. There it is right there. It already happened, right? See, does it change again? There it is back again. In fact, we can hear the bass change as well as the guitar, right? There it is. This seems to have a consistent pattern. It's change, change. So some of the things we're listening for is we're listening for the guitar part, especially as guitar players. I mean, our ears tend to go there anyway, right? But another thing we can listen to is we can listen to the bass, because bass players will very frequently, well, they're going to play a bunch of notes, right? But they're very frequently going to change to another root when the chord changes. So if the song is going from E to A, you're going to really hear them focus on that E note when it's an E chord, right? And then you're going to hear them start and focus around the A note when it's on the A chord. So we can listen to the combination of things. The guitar and the bass are 2 very good places to focus your ears to hear those changes. So you could pick any song, and you could just, even when you're driving in your car, you could just say to yourself, I'm going to see if I can hear where the chord changes are. Because before we become musicians, we often just tend to listen to a song and we hear the song as 1 sound. We don't hear it as a bunch of chord changes. But of course, a song is, well, almost every song. There are some 1 chord songs, but not that many. The next step is to pick a simple jam track, maybe one that just has 2 chords, like this one we're going to use here, and just play those chords on the changes only. So you just hit the E when it's the E, and and it's the A when it's the A. That way we're identifying where those chords change, and we're working towards training our ear to hear that shift as well. And remember that whenever we're playing a song or soloing over a jam track, we really should know the chords of that song or jam track in advance. Now, this step 3 is the one that really helped me a lot when I was younger. I did this one so many times. I picked a jam track and then I played a scale for one chord and another scale for the other chord, whatever scale made sense for that chord. So if we take a very simple jam track like this one, it's just E major, A major, we would play E major pentatonic, up and down, or however much time we have on that particular chord, and then A major pentatonic up and down. I didn't bother trying to solo over it. The idea was simply to build the sound of the harmony at that moment, and then change the scale to build the sound of that harmony at that moment in my brain. And eventually, after doing that many, many times, I could hear a 1 chord to a 4 chord very easily. And like we said, 1 chord to 4 chord, that's extremely common. So if you get that alone, you're really well on your way. So let's just try that for a second. I'll show you what I mean. This is a jam track from our Patreon. It just goes E and then A. I will admit that is not the most fun thing to do on a jam track. I know that we want to tear on some cool licks that we know, but this really will build the sound of those chord changes in your mind, in your ear, as we say. Because what we're doing is we're just playing the major pentatonic scale for each chord. Because those chords, E major, it belongs to E major pentatonic, right? It is the sound, that scales, E major pentatonic, is the sound of an E major chord. And you'll notice that I kept it so simple. I just did E major pentatonic easy shape and A major pentatonic easy shape. If that's too easy, you could make it a little more complex. You could play E major pentatonic easy shape and A major pentatonic shape for funny B. Whatever. As you get good at it, you can make it more complex for yourself. The main point is listening to the sound of those harmonic changes. Now, here's the second to last step. One of the other things that I did a lot, and it was mostly because my teacher made me do this. I didn't particularly like doing this, but it sure helped. He would make us play the chords of a song and then the scale for each chord. So for example, we would play an E chord, let it ring, play the scale. Up and down. Play the next chord of the song, play that scale up and down. Sounds silly, but my God, did that help, especially as we did it with more complex songs. So for example, what if we took a 12-bar blues? That's actually not very complex at all, but it does have a 1 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord in a particular order. So let's say we were doing that in the key of A. A would be 1. I could strum my A chord, play A major pentatonic. What's the 4 chord would be D. Back to the 1 chord, A. Now, what does it do? It goes to the 5 chord. And what's the 5 chord? That's E. It's also a good quiz for yourself to be quick at what 1, 4, 5 is, right? Play the scale of 5 chord. And then it goes down to D. And then it goes to A. Just when you hit those chords and those scales, you can really start to hear the harmony of the song, the form of the song. Let's say I just play the 1, the 5, and then the 4, and you'll see what I mean. The 1 and the scale, the 5, the 4, and home again, 1. when we get used to the way that sounds, that is when we can start to hear the songs underneath. And you can do this for much more complex songs. Whatever song you might be working on, do that first. If you're gonna build a cool solo on it, or if you're preparing to jam with some friends on a certain song, go through that process. Identify what the chords are. If it's a minor chord, you just use minor pentatonic, right? So let's say it was in A minor. There's an A minor bar chord, A minor pentatonic. And then D minor pentatonic, right? And maybe it's E minor. And then A minor, or whatever the song does. Now remember, it's not that we have to change scales when the chords of a song change. And in fact, when we look at a lot of classic rock and blues, they are most often not changing scales. But does that mean we want to limit ourselves to that? Because we notice that when certain famous songs do grab a note that is outside of the expected pentatonic that we might normally be playing, those are the moments that make us go, wow, what is that? You know, like the note in Stairway to Heaven, it's A minor pentatonic, but there's a sneaky little F note there, right at the end of the first lick. Or in Hotel California, there's a fantastic note that is like harmonic minor, we would say, if you want to get super fancy, but it's not in B minor pentatonic. And he lands that lick on that note because he knows the chord at the moment is F sharp 7, and he's going to hit a note from F sharp 7. That sounds really complex, but if you went through this process that I just said, where you played the chord and then you played a scale for the chord, you start to build the sound of the song in your ear, and in general, you start to get better at being able to hear those changes. So as I said, I know this is not the most fun exercise that you can do, but believe me, this one will really help to take your guitar playing, just your general musicianship, to the next level. And our Patreon this week, we're gonna have more exercises that will help you to do this, and all those jam tracks are on there. They can help you to train your ear to hear those changes and to target certain notes of those chords. So check those out. And as always, we'll put a video on the screen here for you from the channel, because we've got lots of great videos here on YouTube for you, including this one, which the algorithms have chosen just for you. And my name is Blue Morris, and I teach guitar lessons here in Vancouver, and I'll see you in the next one.